Hello YouTube, Dave here again. I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons for nearly 20 years at this point. I started with the last tail end of 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, but one of the things that I really remember back from my days of playing AD&D was how terrifying Energy Drain was as a monster's ability. We were playing through a dungeon, I think we were about 3rd or 4th level, and one of the major encounters in that dungeon was a wight, or a pair of wights. And it was absolutely nerve-wracking because of their ability to drain, I think it was levels back then. And we took the fight very, very seriously and were very cautious about everything that we did because of just how damaging that sort of mechanic was. Now, fast forward to the modern day, to the current day, and we have 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Now, I love D&D 5th edition, and it's honestly one of probably the closest to perfect rule sets as far as what I'm looking for as I could possibly imagine it to have been. But there are some rooms for improvement, and one of the things that kind of got brought up by a viewer in one of the comments when I was talking about the Demon Lords from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes and Out of the Abyss was Demogorgon's hit point drain. And hit point drain is something that should be an absolutely terrifying mechanic. What it is you get hit with an attack and you have to make a Constitution saving throw. If you fail the saving throw, instead of simply taking damage, your hit point maximum is reduced by the amount of damage you took. So if you had 100 hit points, got hit for 25, and failed your saving throw, your new maximum hit point total is 75. And again, that's something that should be absolutely terrifying. And there are several monsters that have similar abilities. The reason that's so scary is that if your hit point maximum is reduced to 0, you're automatically dead, rather than having to go through things like death saving throws. So again, it's something that on paper looks to be a very scary mechanic, and something that makes monsters that have those abilities to be very intimidating, and something that you should be in fear of. The downside is that in 5th edition, you regain all of those lost hit points after taking a long rest. And as far as that mechanic goes, I know it's sort of a point of contention for a lot of people, just how much you get back after a long rest. And there are certain aspects of, the long rest that I completely understand for the sake of having the game flow properly. I would much rather let my players regain all of their lost hit points from taking a long rest, rather than having them go back to an inn and resting for 30 days to get, 1 hit point back a day. It's just one of those things that it helps the game flow. It is definitely not realistic in any way, shape, or form, but it helps with the flow of the game, and that's the reason that I don't mind it. I differ in my view of that, however, when it comes to hit point drain or energy drain from 5th edition monsters. I think that energy drain is something that needs to be a terrifying mechanic, and something that when a player or a character encounters a monster that has this ability, it is viewed as a genuinely frightening situation rather than a temporary inconvenience. So I thought about a couple of different ways that I could make hit point drain or energy drain feel more important, and have it feel like it's something that you should be more cautious about. So I wanted to present a couple of ideas that I was kicking around, and and this is something that I want this to be open to discussion. So I am not saying that the methods that I came up with are the best ways to do it, or even really competent ways to do it. It's just sort of what I'm thinking. Like, I don't view my opinions or my suggestions as, better than anybody else's. So if anyone has ways to, fix my suggestions, or ways that it could be better implemented, don't hesitate to throw that out there, because I don't take it personally. I want this to be a discussion that everybody gets involved in. And if you have a better way of doing it than what I present, then that's awesome, and I think that you should absolutely let me know, because a lot of these discussion videos have been, a lot of fun to just go through the comments. So anyway, here are a couple of thoughts that I had for energy drain. In terms of like hit point loss or ability score loss or whatever it may be. I know level drain's not really a thing anymore, and I'm okay with that, because I remember level drain being really kind of a pain in the butt with previous editions. And in some editions, it just didn't really match up with what you gained from leveling. Like in 3rd edition, if you sustained a negative level, I think it was a fixed amount of hit points, -1 to all attack rolls, -1 to all saving throws, and I think you even suffered -1 to like skill checks and stuff like that, which is just way sort of disproportionate because only the fighter classes actually get +1 to their base attack or their attack rolls at every level, and I don't know of any class that gets +1 to their saving throws for each, level that they gain. So that was always sort of a lopsided thing, and I'm glad that level drain's not an issue anymore because, like I said, it sucked. But there are still draining abilities, and I want them to be something that's scary. Just again, sort of segue off a little bit. It's kind of like how in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, if you came across a monster with magic resistance, it was kind of terrifying because, your wizards were some of your more powerful damage-dealing characters in combat situations, and you go up against a drow. I think they had like 85% magic resistance, so in the event you cast a spell on them, there was an 85% chance that it was going to be negated and just not affect them at all. So it was something that was scary, and now it doesn't really have the same level of impact that it used to. So going back to the main subject, 'cause I'm sidetracking, quite a bit here. So ability drain, energy drain, hit point drain, and whatever it may be. I think most of the things in 5th edition actually do hit point drain. So that's the one that I really want to focus on here. The first thing that I will say for both of these methods, a restoration spell should recover those lost hit points. Now, it may not necessarily be all of them. You may have them roll maybe a hit die or something for or a certain number of hit dice to see what they recover. But the restoration spell should be able to negate some of this damage, and making that spell something worth having or something worth going to a temple for. So that's the first thing that I kind of want to say and get out of the way, and I'm sure there are ways to make the restoration be something that this single spell isn't going to just say, hey, all of your hit points are back now, so congratulations. There are probably, like I said, ways to do it. It could be like a D6, like a certain number of D6 hit points restored, and then 1 D6 or 1 D8 or even 1 D10 for each spell slot that you cast the spell of beyond, whatever level restoration is in 5th edition. I don't play as a player, so I don't have the familiarity with those like a lot of people might. So that was the first thing. But how to make hit point loss, again, feel something that goes from, I'll just take a long rest to, oh crap, I gotta be careful now. So have the possibility of the hit point drain being permanent. The way to go about this is that instead of having them roll the saving throw at the time the damage incurs, and this is sort of taking an idea from 3rd edition, I believe it was, the drain happens then and there. So if you have 100 hit points and you get hit by an energy draining attack that does 25, your maximum hit points are only 75 for the time being. So that's something that, again, makes those attacks somewhat terrifying and something that you're going to start taking a lot more seriously. Then, after you complete a long rest, you roll your saving throw then, and on a pass, you can regain your hit points as per normal. You manage to shrug off the damage that was dealt. On a failure, that hit point loss is permanent unless restored through a restoration spell. And again, that makes restoration feel like a spell that actually has, a significant purpose. It's something that makes the hit point drain a terrifying ability and will cause your players or force your players to become more cautious when dealing with enemies that have that sort of feature. Now, in terms of regaining your maximum hit points, I don't still think that the best way to do it is to simply have them come back all at once at the end of a long rest. I think that there are still ways that this type of damage really needs to take time because it was a physical drain of your character's life force, and it's not something that just comes back when you have a sandwich, a Sprite, and a nap, right, kind of idea. So that was the first method that I had considered, is having the saving throw take place after a long rest to see if the loss is permanent, but having the loss take effect immediately and instantly drop those hit points down to make that ability seem a bit more worthwhile. Another option would be to have the saving throw take place at the time the attacks happen, and then have your character, if they're permanent, have your character have to spend hit dice in order to get those hit points back. Now, you could say that you can only spend 1 hit dice per day per like instance of these energy drains. So for example, if you get hit with 3 separate attacks, then you'd be able to spend like maybe 3 hit dice or something. Just that way, again, they can't all come back all at once, and that's something that could be used in order to, again, make hit dice feel a little bit more important, and to, again, make the energy drain something that's tougher to recover from than simply taking a nap. So having those sorts of restrictions. Another thought that just sort of sprung into my mind as I was talking about it is having, instead of having restoration affect a certain number of hit points, have it be done based off of the individual wounds that cause the energy drain. So that's sort of another idea that I just sort of came up with. So this would require that both the Dungeon Master and the player keep track separately of which attacks drained which amount of energy. And this method could apply to either of the 2 methods that I have mentioned, because restoration, again, should be effective no matter what. So for example, if you get hit with 1 attack that does 10 damage, permanent like hit point loss, another attack that does 7, and then another attack that does 8, just because I like to keep it at 25 because it's easy for me to use that sort of mental math when I'm trying to come up with other thoughts. You could have it so that the wounds are treated in the order that they were received, and they only restore hit points based off how much that was lost. So for the first one, if you get hit with, if you lose 10 hit points, the first restoration spell restores, heals that wound and restores those 10 hit points. The next one would restore the 7, and the last would restore the 8. And it's just, again, sort of ideas that I was kind of throwing around and kicking around. But it's just something that I feel like those types of abilities went from being some of the most terrifying things to go up against for player characters to being something that's more of an annoyance than something that their characters would actually be in fear of. So I kind of want to bring that sort of level of seriousness back to those types of abilities. So let me know in the comments below what you guys think, if you have any other suggestions, or if there are ways to modify mine, because like I said, mine are nowhere near like these, nowhere near perfect, and I'm sure there's lots of room for improvement, and you guys have always had some amazing suggestions, so I look forward to reading what you guys come up with in the comments below. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time. Take care.